How's it going, everyone? Bryce Newberger from the Soul Word here, and we're about to get into our interview video with Verity from Bordering Bears. It's a fantastic conversation where we talk about mental health. We talk about living life with mental health, ways to get actual help. Sometimes we've all read like 5 ways to help or, 10 things to do or whatever. And maybe those helped, maybe those discouraged you, maybe you've reached out for help for mental health or mental issues and you've been burned, maybe people have misunderstood you. The whole goal is just to spread awareness and knowledge of this conversation. And today, Verity and I are going to talk about what actually helps and what has actually helped us and what hasn't helped us. There is one thing that we did not mention on there that I personally found to be a wonderful resource. And I never want to proselytize on here. My goal is not to, try and convert everyone to Christianity. We're exploring truths. But there is one thing I have seen, and I would be interested to hear if any other religions or doctrines do this, but connected to churches, when I was a youth pastor, I counseled teens. Now, I'm not a licensed counselor. I operate within there's training I took and preparation I had and classes and all that. And I can go so far. There are certain things that I have to say, hey, let me connect you with a licensed therapist. Let me send you to an actual counseling office. But sometimes you just need to talk to someone. You need to get something off your chest. I know I need that. And pastors and churches are a resource I found that are free. They don't charge you and they take a lot of time to help you. So I've spent a lot of my energy with students and young people and other people in church. And I take them out to coffee. I pay for the coffee. Sometimes I paid for the meal. And I actually had a budget set aside in my church budget for meetings with people and coffee with people. And it was actually something that was very much part of the job description, was going out and helping people pro bono. The church covers it. I cover it. I make time. I fit you into my schedule and I take you out and talk to you. I've also received that benefit from other pastors and people where, man, going through divorce and going through the grief of loss of a brother, losing a job from a church. I have reached out to other churches, other pastors, and they have just been wonderful to take me out, spend time with me, talk to me. And so again, I'm not trying to push anyone into church out there, not trying to proselytize or convert anyone to Christianity, but a real practical help to me has been pastors and church communities, small groups that churches host, and it's free. I'll talk on this, used betterhelp.com, but that was $260 a month for a licensed therapist, and it was good. It was a wonderful resource that I've used, but it's expensive, and you can't always afford that. So if you're out there and you don't have a deep pocketbook, right? If you don't have a lot of money, and you're looking for free help, maybe check out your local institutions like church or something like that, and you can get help there. We also mentioned some other great resources like Suicide Prevention Hotline and Seven Cups which is a listener app. We'll talk about more of that in the questions to come, and we'll link those down in the description. I hope you guys enjoy this. That being said, let's get to this discussion. How's it going, everyone? Bryce Newberger here with the Soul Ward, and I'm joined with a very special guest today. We have Verity with us, who runs a website known as borderingbears.co.uk. And Verity, she is focused on mental health. In the past, she had more of a focus on mental health. Now she's more of a freelance writer. And we're going to kind of get into her story, but we're going to take time today to talk about mental health and just bring awareness to mental health and talk about kind of her experience with mental health. And then I'll drop in some of my experience with mental health. And we're just really looking to bring awareness to mental health and what every common person on the street can do and some practical things that they can and experiences they can maybe relate with. Verity, how are you today?
Hi, I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Fantastic. We both have coffee with us, right? Because you can't have
Oh, yes.
any kind of conversation without coffee. Verity, so why don't we just start off with the basics? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, as you can probably hear, I'm from the United Kingdom. Um, from about the age of 12, I really, really struggled with my mental health and found the services were lacking, shall we say, that there wasn't enough around to help people. And I grew older thinking maybe I'll get help on the adult side of things. Had my daughter, so then trying to dual wield raising a little girl while managing whatever was going on up there. Um, I eventually got a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, which I believe now people more call emotionally unstable personality disorder,
Mm.
alongside anxiety, and just noticed there was no realistic help out there. So created Bordering Bears and started working for myself. And something must have worked along the line.
Yeah. So, can you tell me a little bit too about what is BPD, borderline personality disorder? What is that? How does that show? What does that actually mean?
Um, well, it can come out about in a number of ways. One of the ways is childhood trauma. For me, I was bullied quite severely when I was a child, and that just carried on. And then the symptoms that arose were things like self-harm, impulsive behaviours, um, a lot of promiscuous behaviour in my past. But for some people, it can be things like drug taking, gambling, anything to sort of boost yourself, I guess. And I've never been good at hiding my emotions, so if I'm upset, I will be an absolute wreck.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, you throw a child into the mix, and that isn't ideal. And I'd say it all really the statistics basically say that 1 in 10 people with this condition will end their own lives, which it may not sound like much, 10%, but it's still far too high a number. And personally, I did come quite close to it.
Yeah.
August 2018, things weren't going well. My daughter was at her father's at the time, and I'd had some bad news. It's almost like I wasn't controlling what I was doing. I was at my mother's house, locked myself in the bathroom, and just started raiding the medicine cabinet. And 24 hours of being on a drip to stop my liver and kidneys shutting down later, I realised it had gone too far.
Mm.
So that's the kind of thing you're dealing with. I mean, you will hear a lot of stick about BPD, of people saying that people who have it are evil or bad, or probably shouldn't say this on a video, but the worst one you hear is that people with BPD are good for bedroom activities, but not a lot else.
Mm.
So there's a hell of a lot of negative vibes associated with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hearing some of the things that you're saying, and just kind of comparing my own experiences, I hear a lot of what you're saying. And I'm like, oh wow, maybe I have BPD. But I've always, and just to clarify for everyone too, Verity is not saying that she's a professional when it comes to mental health or anything like that. She has her lived experiences, and we're just sharing experiences today. So that's all we're doing. But I hear something. I go, wow, I think I might have BPD with certain things. My story is actually very close to yours in certain aspects, and that's not something that actually, as someone who kind of gets on a stage from professionally from time to time, and has spotlights and people turning to me. That's not something that I like to go public with, but actually I have a very similar story to you in a lot of ways. But when I look at that and I go, wow, okay, maybe I have BPD or something. I've never understood why getting a diagnosis would be necessarily necessary. I look at it, I go, well, I am who I am. I've lived my whole life this way. Why would I need, what does adding a label to me help? What's been your experience with that?
Cool, because nobody wants to diagnose a child, particularly around the ages of puberty, because of so many hormonal changes. And then as in you work towards adulthood, people might think, oh, it's just depression, you just need counselling, you just need to, it's always you just need to go outside, you just need to get fresh air, you just need to change your diet. But sometimes there's something in there that's, whether it's a chemical imbalance or, sorry if my earpieces keep
You're,
falling out.
yeah, they all do.
Of course. Sometimes we need that little bit of extra help. I mean, having the diagnosis for me did tick a lot of boxes and was just like, okay, so it's not that I'm inherently evil or bad or something. It's that this has happened. But likewise, a diagnosis, I believe, can also be a problem. my partner and I were discussing this just the other night. You do get a lot of people, not all, but I'd say some, who the diagnosis becomes almost a mask. It's almost like an excuse. They have this problem, therefore their behaviours, etc., are acceptable. And that is one thing, big thing I've learned on my recovery journey, is that yes, you may have this diagnosis, you may have this condition, but it stops being acceptable when you are hurting those around you. I mean, for me, I've recently admitted to myself there were times that I probably wasn't fit to be a parent. I know in today's age it's concerning saying that on camera, but I was barely able to look after myself. And thankfully, like my family used to step up. My mum would come and she'd have to clean my house for me because I just couldn't. And I'd put things in order, like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do this. Right, what needs to be doing? Okay, I need to feed my kid, I need to feed myself, I need to feed the cat, and all the house. So you go from having this diagnosis to it ruling your life because suddenly everything you are is all about that issue. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think I've slightly tangented there.
No. Yeah, this is good.
I guess it's more about breaking away from that diagnosis, realizing you can be more than that. As I say, sites like, say, for example, Reddit can be so helpful for finding advice. But then there's certain places where you'll look it up and think, oh gosh, am I a good enough parent because I have this condition? Am I a good enough friend? Am I a good enough partner? And there'll be people in there saying, anyone with this condition is evil. Anyone with this condition should just, I'll leave you to figure out what's put there.
Yeah.
But sometimes even with the diagnosis, there isn't the medical help. I mean, especially after COVID, there's so much backlog with people needing this help and not getting it. Mm-hmm. But COVID can't be used as an excuse. I mean, take my situation from years ago. At one point, I was waiting over 18 months to see the specialist. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time you're being passed around because conditions like BPD that are personality disorders, not everybody can touch or deal with. So you have to wait to be able to find the right specialist. Yeah. And speaking as a parent, a hell of a lot of stigma there. Mm-hmm. It actually got to a stage where I stopped asking for help. And that's very, very concerning because in the UK we have something called the crisis team. So you can present at A&E or ring up and say, look, my mental health is crumbling, I need support. And then you can speak to a team who can then liaise with the psychiatrist and stuff. I think I've got this right, so please don't hold me like that this isn't possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can remember the last time I ever called them for help, I was actually told by the operator, we notice on file that you're a single parent, we will be involving social services. Oh. And I'd had them involved in the past, and it honestly felt like I was being penalised. And as somebody who'd been self-harming since the age of 12, and this was probably when I was 27, maybe a bit before that. I'm not sorry, the dates aren't important either way. To be told that you're asking for help and you're being penalised by being investigated, it really hurt. Yeah. And I think the irony for me is that in the past, I used to ring these services for support after I bandaged my arm up or something. And this time I was so proud of myself because I was ringing for this support and I hadn't actually done anything. I preempted these feelings, noticed they were there and asked for help to be told, you're having social services involved, and then to be told a few days later you're not actually in crisis enough for the support.
Mm.
And in that moment, I'd said to the social worker, who obviously found nothing wrong with the parenting of my daughter, I will never ever be asking for help again. I can promise you now, the next time my mental health declines, I will be dealing it with a bandage and a blade, and I will not be making that call.
Mm.
And looking back on it now, that is a really, really dangerous thing to be saying. Even as somebody who had 15 years of self-harming under their belt, for someone to be saying and holding their hands up to say, I would rather self-harm than ask for support, says to me there is something wrong with the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which led to me figuring that if there was no support going to be given, I'd sell.
Mm.
So rather than returning to a normal university, I was partway through getting a degree in psychology. I've now got a master's in youth justice because I wanted to understand the mindset of the bullies from when I was younger. So it's been a real learning journey. But if anything, it was that overdose that brought everything to light.
Mm.
Because as twisted as it sounds, that's when I got the support.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard, Bryce, but they always say, oh, why didn't people ask for help when it's too late? You get help when it's too late.
Yeah.
Or at least that's my thoughts, unless you can afford to go private.
Mm. Yeah.
And now we are 3.5 years later. I've moved house. I've got a wonderful partner. My daughter's doing well. And ever since that day, I've been clear, which has led to me further developing. Sorry, I rambled on for a bit there.
That's why you're here. We are here. You're on here so we can hear you talk, and everything you've been saying is so. You're making my job easy because, yeah, you're saying so many great things. Again, your story just rings so true with me. I told you a little bit before the call. This is not something I've ever really said publicly, especially not through the Soul Ward. But I was much the same. I looked for help through what we have here in the States, here in America. And, we have like the suicide prevention hotline and that kind of thing. But I was a pastor at the time, and I was really concerned. I was a youth pastor at the time. And so I was really concerned as I was struggling that I was going to lose my job, or that I was going to, be overly judged. And you're just trying to get by with your life, and you're just trying to keep the wheels spinning. And the blowback, right? Like, I did seek help, and I did lose my job, and the institution that I ended up getting put in was like a prison. I was put on a mandatory 72-hour hold, and it was like a prison. Everything was taken from me. Everything that like made me happy was gone. I lost all control of like they took my phone, they took everything. And then it was difficult to even get reading material, because I just wanted to read a book while I was in there. It was like difficult to speak to loved ones on the outside. I was put in a common area, whereas like I was put in there because I had a bad reaction to a steroid in a really bad part of my life. And then I was put in with people who were suffering like genuine psychosis, and actual like people screaming that they were demon possessed, and people saying that they were God, herself, and all of this. And just, I mean, again, we're a little bit, we're not really censored here, but but a little bit of parental warning for any younger listeners. But there, I made friends with a guy from New York in there, and his roommate would just masturbate over him, like, and it was like, what did we do to be put in this situation? Why are we being punished? And so, yeah, it left that that mindset, which is a very dangerous mindset, like you're saying, of I would rather not get help because the help was not helpful. And really, the counselor that I spoke to in the institution was very like a disappointed mother. You know, it was like, how can we make sure you never come here ever again? And I was just like, and she even said, she said, our goal is to make sure you never come back here again. And I thought, well, what if someone's like a business owner and, they lost their business overnight and they lost millions of dollars overnight. It would be good for them to have a place to say, this was my whole life was turned upside down. Maybe they do need to check themselves into a facility like that for a night or a day. That's why we have them, right? Like, not to not be used. So anyways, yeah, I relate a lot with what you're saying of just sometimes the help's not helpful. Let's talk about some things that are helpful and some things that you have found success with in your day-to-day life. And neither of us are going to say that we're on the nose phenomenally successful this, but where have you found success?
Um, Starting my website probably helped a lot. As you said, I am not successful in the slightest. I am not an influencer. I'm not rich and famous and the next Kardashian wannabe. Like I have no money to my name pretty much. We pay the bills, but that that's something. Being able to get out of bed in the morning is something. Um, as strange as it sounds, I'm chubbier than I'd like to be because I've recovered, and that is something. Because previously I'd overstress, not eat. So where sometimes I look in the mirror and say, "Oh, I'm a little chunk," it's actually you're eating. Congrats. It's the little things. Don't my advice to people would be don't look for the massive world rendering successes. Look for that little bit. Like, oh, you managed to brush your teeth today. Yes. I think all too often people want to fix mental health completely. They want to be free of relapses, free of addiction, free of all the emotions, being able to do normal things. And I use that inverted because what is normal? Um, but you need to give yourself those tiny little wins to help spur you forward. So, yeah, I created my website. Great. But yes, too often people will put down those tiny little things that could actually help them. They are the stepping stones to recovery. So what about you, Bryce? Have you got any little wins that helped you along the way?
Well, I did become a Fortune 500 million. No, I no. Yeah, I think kind of what you're saying there is building something new can be a. So I learned guitar when I, and that's a recent thing for me. So the way that my kind of life took a turn was I lost my job, I lost my wife, I lost my home, kind of lost everything. And in amid all of that loss, it was very helpful for me to pick up and learn a new skill. So I've always loved music. I've played piano, and I really have always wanted to play guitar, but it seemed too difficult. And so, but I put the time in to just um, pay for lessons, which weren't that expensive, for 2 months, and got a really good guitar teacher. And that that new skill, to this day, when I am having an anxiety attack, a panic attack, or suffering with depression, picking up the guitar and learning a new song on guitar or something can be a really good thing to get me out of a bad place. I'll say also that it it was it's also been very helpful to know a list of resources to turn to that are. I find that private resources are good. So one thing that I found was and this was many years ago, before my life took a really hard turn with everything, but I've always kind of dealt with these mental issues. Um, I found an app on the Play, Android Play Store. It's going to also be on the iTunes Store, but it's called Seven Cups, and it was a therapy app. And there you can have people who are listeners, and then you can participate in group online things. And it was great because I could be anonymous. It didn't out me for anything like that, and I could just go connect with another human being who would listen. Now, because it's not professional, they do have professional services that you can buy through the app. I never did that. Um, But sometimes you get bad listeners, where you're on that app and they're like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Well, I'm really struggling with these thoughts," and they're like, "Yeah, that sucks," and I'm like, or they just don't respond. I had one person on there. I connected with a friend on there. She said she opened up about struggling with abandonment and feeling abandoned, and then the listener just never replied to that, which is not very helpful. But she just tried again and again. Have you found any free resources that's really helped you?
As a resource, but there's a few communities that I'm members of that are nothing to do with mental health, but absolutely supportive. Again, this is one that's not suitable for children. There's a Facebook group for a Harry Potter fan fiction that I'm a member of. The reason it's not suitable for children is because the fanfic is certainly not suitable for children.
Mm.
But the people on there are amazing. You need some advice, go to them. And the fanfic itself is actually one of my coping mechanisms. I go always to that same story and read it when I'm having a bad day.
Mm.
So it's finding a community where you feel safe. I'd say it doesn't have to be mental health based or depression based or even anything to do with anything really. Say for example, you play Fortnite and there's a Fortnite based group online. Talk to them. If you feel comfortable, find those people you can share with. Just be mindful that for all intents and purposes they are strangers on the internet. So don't be giving out too many personal details.
That's a fantastic piece of advice there too. I can relate to is that a community is so important, and in a weird way too. I feel like sometimes online community can be more helpful than actual physical community in a weird way. I mean, um, I think one of the benefits I found of people online to speak to is that I really want to have. I don't like pity, and I don't like being a victim, and I don't know if that's just like a, a male thing, but I feel like females would probably want that too. But it's like I want to appear strong and successful all the time, and I don't want to be vulnerable. And so having an online community of friends that I can turn to and be, real with, kind of helps keep that in a safe place in a lot of ways. Almost like I think pre-internet, you have like AA meetings and stuff like that people would go to, and it's like a step outside of your normal life and the safe community of people. Whereas, friends and family can sometimes you're having a good day and everything is good. You're on a good, you're having a good ride, and then people lovingly, but they check up on you or something, and it kind of you're like, well, I didn't want to be in that headspace today. I was in a good headspace. I don't want to go back to that other headspace. What's been your experience with online community versus like local community?
It's varied. I mean, I've had people online. Obviously, you get the trolls
Oh yeah.
who will tell you to go and do some delightful things. I don't want to say it because I don't want to trigger any of your viewers. But at the same time, again, the Fire Whiskey and Honey lot, I message them for advice and they'll come up with some reasonable things. There's those little pockets that you can find them. I've actually always found online helpful, even before this. My online stuff actually started probably when I was about 13, about 12, 13, playing little online MMOs that nobody has ever heard of. Truth be told, that's actually how I met the partner I'm with now. You'd get some people in there who were twisted individuals, but then you'd get the ones, and I still speak to a lot of them from all over the world, who you could say, you know what, I'm having a really, really bad day, or I've just had a relapse. What do I do?
Mm.
I think in one instance, one of them actually rang my parents, who, bear in mind, were downstairs in the house, to tell them just like, yeah, Verity needs help now,
Mm.
which at the time peed me off a little bit, but now it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, what, that was quite cool.
Mm.
And then in person as well, you get people who are your absolute rock, and then you will get those who may treat you like the little lost lamb, or I think the worst ones is when people you grow apart or you fall out, and anything that you told them becomes that ammunition. Because one of the things that used to frighten me was trust. By trusting somebody enough in the real world with all this information, technically I'm giving them that ammunition to hurt me if they chose to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's learning who is right to trust. And sometimes one of the ways around that could be not to give the full story. So, for example, I might speak to you about my concerns to do with parenting, and I'll speak to somebody else about my concerns about self-harm, and I'll speak to somebody else about something different, so that nobody has the full out.
Mm.
Which can also probably be helpful for the person you're speaking to, because otherwise a lot of people are facing their own mental health struggles. Some people, I find it helpful listening about other people's problems because it helps take me out of my own mindset. For others, it just weighs them down more. So
Yeah.
I think when you are looking for community support, just be mindful that the person you're speaking to may also be struggling to swim as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, that I think that's what's so interesting is that it takes courage, is what I've noticed, to do these things. It takes courage to get help. It takes courage to reach out to other people because people can hurt you. And when you're opening up a vulnerable part of your life, that does essentially give people, it kind of hands them a knife to stab you with. And
Yeah.
I can relate that I have been in that situation where I've opened up to someone and then they've turned around and just stabbed me with the knife I handed them. And I thought, well, ow. And the inclination can be, the leaning can be, don't do that again, right? You know, fool me once, shame on you. But um, I think courage is to continually reach out and continually get that help. Um, I've noticed that sometimes the people can help the most understand the most. They've been through it themselves, but those people also have their own scars and their own damage and their own trauma. And so although they can sometimes be the best helper, sometimes they need help too. And I've noticed, you know, sometimes uh, people who I turn to that really do understand, sometimes they're in a good spot, I'm in a bad spot, and they lift me up. Other times I'm in a good spot, they're in a bad spot, and I lift them up. It's never great when we're both in a low spot and and we're not lifting each other up, you
I think
know.
that was the doorbell.
Yeah. Is your door ringing? Oh, okay. Um, well, we can take a break real quick, and we're back. so yeah, but no, we were just saying that, you know, it takes courage to find that support in other people, and sometimes you have to keep trying, and I do think it takes strength to get help. Let's talk about some of the other coping mechanisms. I think you'd mentioned, I can't remember if it was before we started recording or we kind of said hi to each other before, just being like, welcome to the call and we're live. But uh, we talked about, you had mentioned like some researchers say like take a walk, but it's not always a great time to take a walk, that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
what are let me help lead the question a little bit better. I was struggling with anxiety attacks and depression, and I still deal pretty heavily with anxiety attacks and depression off and on. And I learned that when you're suffering from anxiety, you want to pace around nervously, but you actually need to stop and ground yourself and focus yourself. When you're depressed, I just want to lay on the couch all day and do nothing, but I found get up and taking a walk is a helpful thing to do. But sometimes I'm having that it's not always practical, like we're saying. Like, I've had
Yeah.
a panic attack while I'm in a meeting with something. I was, I've had a panic attack while I was giving a speech, on a stage. And so it's not always practical to take this advice. What's been your experience with some of the impractical advice off and on?
Well, for the most part, I was a single parent up until a couple of years ago when my partner and I got together. So a lot of the advice does seem to be geared towards nuclear families or those with more than one parent. So things like, oh, get somebody else to look after the child and go have a walk. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm a single mum, that's not happening. Or people saying, oh, get a babysitter. As I don't know what the situation is in the States, but generally single mums normally can't afford a babysitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wasn't always helpful. And it was even things like hold in your emotions till your child is in bed. And there was so many impractical things. So you do end up having to find it for yourself, whether it's dealing with what you can manage. So if your mind is absolutely imploding, find a way to do dinner. I mean, have a bowl of ice cream, order a pizza, do something that involves fulfilling that need.
Mm.
When it comes to calming those thoughts, one thing that we use in our household is mindfulness. So sitting on the floor, cross legs, eyes closed, hands palm up so you can't be sat there fiddling with anything, and listening to music and just breathing. And like you said, even that you can't always do. If you're in the middle of a meeting, if you're giving a speech, you can't just suddenly sit down on the floor. It's about finding a load of different things. I've even gone as far as reciting prime numbers in my head when I'm feeling anxious before, and I'll be honest, I can't get very far before I'm struggling.
Mm.
And then my mind is too busy fixating on the, oh goodness, which number goes next? And suddenly that anxiety is just fizzled away. It's still there, but I've managed to sort of change the station, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, as a parent, when I was really struggling, I had three boys. My youngest was an infant diabetic, diagnosed at 1 year old with type 1 diabetes, and he was in the ICU for 2 weeks, and he comes out, and we're getting, my wife and I were getting used to needles and shots and blood reading, and all that kind of stuff. And essentially becoming home nurses. While also I was on staff at a church and was salaried and was constantly overworking myself, way more hours than I probably should have worked. And then my wife was also struggling with her own postpartum anxiety and depression. She lost her brother on Christmas Eve, and so she was really just dealing with grief and loss. And I remember being like, I don't have time to be depressed or anxious because I've got to keep this family together. Like it's all on me. And I did find a power in asking for help. And so, of course, I was connected to a church and a church community. And so, people always offer and say, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Everyone loves to say that. What I found is not everyone means that. And so it took courage to take someone up on their offer, especially when people would say no or let me down. And you can feel kind of sheepish or burned. And someone says, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I'd say, actually, we could use dinner tonight. We could really use dinner tonight. So if you could just bring by a casserole or something, I'd really appreciate that. And to watch some people go, absolutely, you've got it. Those people are awesome. But there's also some people who are like, oh, you want me to cook for you? And it's like, I'm sorry I asked. I'm sorry you offered, And so that courage to continue to put yourself out there and ask for help when you can get it. But, there's sometimes, yeah, you just can't get that help. Those people, I surrounded myself with those helpful people, but I was homeschooling my kids. There was there was a pandemic going on. This was 2020, um, and so people would help. But I remember people who genuinely meant well would say, "Bryce, you can't do all of this." And I thought, that's great. Who's going to homeschool my kids? Who's going to do my job, right? Who's going to provide for my family? It is on me. And some things there is no help for. People can only who's going to watch my son's blood sugar throughout the night and give him shots and help him. And so yeah, I can relate. Especially you being a single mom at the time. I really did kind of feel like a single dad at the time, because my wife was really just, her brother had died. She was not really functioning. And so she was just another person to take care of, another dependent, so it was like the fourth kid. And I don't mean that disparagingly. Like, of course, her brother died. She was going through a lot. I don't mean to speak ill of her. But yeah, it can take,
She
again.
wasn't in the right headspace to be able to take on those responsibilities and deal with the situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And so finding that local support system, um, can be really helpful in a lot of ways, but sometimes, yeah, you just need to muster the strength to do what needs to be done. Where have you found success kind of in that, when there is no help, there is no one to turn to, you just have to do it? Is there really, and if the answer is no, it's no, but is there any tips or tricks or success you found in being your own support system?
There is, but it's one of the things I use is very, very controversial. Um, I spent years with the whole self-harm issue, almost getting myself caught in that nasty cycle, kind of like what you said about when you had to check yourself into the clinic and they never want to see you there again. It'd be like, I'm never going to again, I'm never going to do it. I'd relapse and then I'd feel guilty and then I'd punish myself for relapsing by relapsing again.
Mm,
And one of the things that I started learning was to stop banning myself from self-harming. And that's where the controversy is that obviously I had a child asleep in the next room and I would sit there, I'd get the bandage out, get all the cleaning supplies out, make sure everything was sterile, and just be like, obviously by the time I'd done all that, by allowing it, I no longer needed to. As strange as it sounded, and I think with being that single parent as well, you don't get a lot of choice. You can't just dip out and do something. And it sometimes felt like that was all I had. By allowing myself to do it, I'd given myself that choice. I didn't need to. And it's something I've taken into other areas of my life. And again, it works. At the moment, I'm in the process of quitting smoking. I'm using a vape, but if I wanted a cigarette, I could go have one. By not putting that hardcore ban in place, it takes off that pressure. It takes off that anxiety of, but what if I mess it all up? So what? What if you do? Try again.
mm.
And I think that is the important one. At least in my opinion, you can't just draw a line under it and be like, okay, I'm all fixed from now on, because it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and just also a little, we're not advocating self harm or anything like that, but I do,
No, no,
yeah,
no, gosh, no.
of course. Um, but I do think it's interesting. I try not to go into the Christian perspective too heavily here or there, but um, I was just doing a teaching a few weeks ago on Hebrews, and it was talking about how the old system of law and legalism and the do's and don'ts and check boxes are a failed system. How we can't do it. We're doomed to fail. And when you again, that kind of mindset of legalistic, like you have to, creating a law for yourself is where the term legalism comes from. I have to do it, and if I don't, I'm a failure and I'm terrible and I should be punished. And the teaching was talking about what's called grace, right? This idea of it's okay. Take a breath. You are loved. You are wonderful. You are beautiful, and you're not a failure. you're a wonderful work of art, and so and you're not expected to be perfect, you know. And so that mindset of kind of taking the pressure off. I heard someone once refer to it as when you're so focused on the problem, like when you're so focused on not having a problem, you're really just focused on the problem, you know. And he said he said as if someone's supposed to say, don't think about elephants and their big ears and their gray skin and their long trunks and how big their feet are, and you know, and you're like, oh, I'm really trying not to, but all you're thinking about is an elephant. And so sometimes, yeah, fixating on the problem, being concerned. I've often thought about that. I have a friend who is AA, and she'll say 100 days sober, 200 days sober, right? And I just thought, personally, I've just thought, like, doesn't that focus you on it though? Like, if you're thinking about how many days you've gone without alcohol, then aren't you still thinking about alcohol? And so I just kind of asked him, like, when do you live in freedom? When do you stop counting the days and just kind of, you're free, right? And I think the real freedom comes from not counting the days, you know, since last incident, but the freedom comes in actually being free and not having to, again, overly fixate on failure and the problem itself. So I do feel like, although, like you said, that could be controversial, I do feel like there's a real for my own self, an experiential truth in just giving yourself grace, you know. It's just not being too hard on yourself. I really do feel like there's a good root and precedent for self-love and self-care in that. Okay,
I think it's
so
about those little wins again as well, though.
yeah.
It's a difficult one. Like, you don't want to be consumed by it, but at the same time, using your friend as an example, going 100 days, 200 days, that's fantastic. I mean, so sometimes you do need those small wins, but when you can get to a stage where you're no longer counting, at the beginning, the counting could be to keep yourself going, keep the motivation. It's when you stop counting and start living, and it's organic. It's not,
Mm.
right, we're not going to think about this. It's just, oh, I completely forgot to count, and I'm still doing great. That is when that living and that grace really comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I almost think of it like a young couple versus an old couple. You know, the young couple is 1 month anniversary, 2 month anniversary. They're just happy that their relationship has lasted a month, 2 months, 3 months, versus 10-year anniversary is not like, wow, I'm so glad we lasted 10 years. It's like, yay, like it's been 10 years of marriage. That's fantastic. Not, woo, can we make it to 11? Um, but yeah, so that yeah. Um, so as we'll kind of wrap up our little conversation here, but let's take some time to talk about your blog. So I noticed that you and then I'll switch us actually over to, you won't be able to see this, but on my little recording thing, I'm on your website, and let me find out where that is though real quick. I did not think about this. So let's look at your website real quick. So Bordering Bears. Tell us a little bit about the name Bordering Bears.
I had a feeling you'd ask me that. Bordering was it, it's an alliteration with bears. Bordering, I used to refer to myself as a borderling, as in someone who has BPD. So that's the bordering. And the bears was this little analogy I came up with when I was younger of glass shards and teddy bears, where you hold on to all these bad things. They're the glass shards. And then eventually, when you get something good, you almost end up tainting it because you're so preoccupied with all your wounds that sometimes those bad things can have a negative effect on the good things. And it's about learning to clean off those wounds before you go for the good things. Well, not even before, but not to let it ruin it, I guess. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I've had so many instances of just preoccupying with the bad and the negative, and can't really properly enjoy things. So That's where the bears came from. I have been informed that my logo looks more like a dolphin. My apologies. I drew it myself on Microsoft Paint.
Oh,
And
really?
then a close friend sort of added the background and spiced it all up a bit. But the mosaic was because there's so many pieces to each of us. And I think that's important too.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a fantastic idea, and I really love the design concept too behind it. I do kind of now see the dolphin now that, now that that's been pointed out, but that looks fantastic, especially being made in Microsoft Paint. I wouldn't have guessed all those little mosaic pieces must have taken quite a lot of time in
It's
Paint.
just the colourful ones that were me. I have to give full credit to the black and grey, sort of the outlines and everything, and the sharpness of it. Full credit there goes to Ben's story. So thank you, Ben.
Oh, that's a graphic designer.
Close friend.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, well,
So
and so just to point out,
it looks worse before.
and just to point out too that you've got blog posts here on physical health, mental health, family, entertainment, lifestyle, and then is the archive section more of just an all-encompassing um, just bucket of all of them?
The archive came about because I created the blog in March of 2020. So COVID lockdowns, everyone's losing their jobs. I decide I'm going to create something
Mm.
because that to me was the clever idea. And I had the website for a year and then kept thinking, oh, do I renew it? Do I not? By this point, it had already lapsed. Do I renew? Do I not? Oh, it's a lot of money for WordPress hosting. And then I finally made the decision that I was going to renew it the day after they'd wiped the lot. So
Mm.
that was then a case of get the domain name back, get the WordPress hosting back, try and find out if I could pull all my posts back, to be told that if I wanted a company to do it, it'd cost me £150.
Oh, oof.
No, not happening.
Yeah.
So everything on the archive is where I've used like Wayback Machine and archiving websites. I think I paid about $6 for them to pull back as much as possible. So I got quite a lot back.
Mm.
So I figured I'll archive that and then just start all the new stuff. So don't be surprised if in March the site goes down again while I look for another great offer for WordPress, but save it all this time.
Yeah. Yes. Well, hopefully, hopefully you can keep that that content. But yeah, so my encouragement to everyone is to check out borderingbears.co.uk. I will put a link in the description when this goes live or when this reposts on YouTube. So when you're watching live on Twitch, it's just kind of on Twitch, but on YouTube in the description, I'll have the reference here to borderingbears.co.uk. There's also just so there's a wealth of content there to just read. And again, Verity is not proclaiming to be an expert or anything. This is just, but there is a form of expertise that comes from lived experience, and that is valuable. And sometimes it's funny in the pastoral world, in the church world, I've seen young kids who are in seminary but have never helped a student in their life, and they've got all these dreams and ambitions and ideas, and you're like, bless his heart, this kid has a degree but he knows nothing. And versus the lived experience in the same world. In the IT world, I was in the corporate IT sector for a long time doing technology. As a trainer and manager, I'd see these people come out of tech school with a degree in technology but no actual experience in technology, and it's like, on paper you're a genius, but you don't know how to do the job I've hired you for. Now I've got to teach you how to how to do this stuff. So there is an expertise that comes from lived experience, which I think you definitely have. Where else can we find you on, like, are you on social media or Instagram or anything?
Yep, I have Instagram. It should be Bordering Bears, and the same with Facebook. There's a Facebook page. Otherwise, there's my personal page. Sorry, I can't talk now. Personal page, which is /Nimmy, NYNNY. Yeah, just come find me on there. I have had a few people who found the website and found my Instagram, messaging me, asking me for advice, saying, "Oh, I think my girlfriend has BPD. What can I do?" I can sit there and encourage and say, right, okay, just bear in mind that if you're in an abusive situation, you need to remove yourself as much as possible. I cannot give any medical advice, though, other than go see a doctor, go see a psychologist. I am not trained.
Yeah,
But
of course.
if you want to read about those experiences and use those to help yourself, by all means, please do.
Yeah. And I will say too that so let's just take a moment as well as we wrap up just to say goodbye to everyone, is that if you are out there and you are dealing with a severe trauma, you are feeling out of control, or you're having any sort of thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please do call 911. Please do reach out to so I have personally used the suicide prevention hotline. They have a chat you can talk to, and they're very wonderful people on the chat. And the hotline themselves, very helpful, very wonderful resource to use. That is a free resource that actually did pull me out of a crisis a few times. And so they're really helpful, really wonderful. So feel free to actually utilize the suicide prevention hotline. I'll also put their their contact in the description as well. And I've dealt with police officers my whole life. When I was a young teen, I was involved in training. I was part of a martial arts gym that specialized in offering their services to police officers. So I had a lot of police officers in my life. They are, despite all the media culture that we had for a while of like cancel cops and all cops are bad, defund the police, that's it. They actually are. There are some bad ones out there. Yes, I've also had experience with that. But the average police officer, they are really helpful. They do want to help you. And I had a health check called on me once, and I spoke to some police officers, and they were phenomenal and fantastic. And they did take some time to talk to me, and they were like, they just wanted to make sure that I was getting help and that I was in a good place. And they said, don't be afraid to call us again if you feel like you're in a bad spot. They're like, this is what we do. A lot of what we do is just talking to people and being those caring voices that do have the means to make sure that you are being safe and everyone else around you is safe. So please, if you're dealing with something out there, do utilize those resources. I also want to say I've used betterhelp.com for a therapist. It was a significant investment for my mental health. I'm glad I did. I spent a few months with BetterHelp therapists, and it was easy. It was $260 in the US per month, which was expensive, but that gave me weekly meetings with a professional therapist and unlimited text conversations. And that was great to get a therapist that would text me and we could just talk on the phone of what was going on. I also mentioned 7 Cups is a wonderful free resource for just to get dedicated listeners. Verity, do you have any resources that you want to add to anyone here besides your wonderful website?
I'm just checking if it's on there. There should be a help page somewhere on my website, or at least there used to be, to inform people about where to go. I'm sorry, I'm just looking now.
Yeah, I'm on there.
Taken down, I will be rather cross.
I do see it. Yes, and I'll show it actually on the screen for everyone.
Oh, there is one. Brilliant. And they should be UK based, so things like the Samaritans that you can call 24/7 if you're feeling low, where you speak to a volunteer. These, I believe, aren't trained medical professionals, but still somebody that you can liaise with. Because that was one of my big things, is that I wanted to make it clear I'm not a professional. However, there are these resources. And likewise, yes, I've had some negative experiences with crisis teams and stuff. However, over the years, I did have those positive experiences. I did have support. And I think that if you have any younger viewers, speaking to schools, university counselling teams can be fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to give any details here, but for example, at my daughter's school, anytime we're having troubles with behaviour, the family, anything, most schools have a link worker or a counsellor who you can liaise with, or who a young person can then liaise with to get that support. So there are options, and you should take them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to highlight a piece of advice that I thought was really valuable earlier, and that's what you brought up because you have a specialization in youth psychology. Through you were saying did you get a master's in youth? You were saying.
Masters in Youth Justice, but
Oh,
I don't use it. That was more for my personal benefit.
yeah, and I have a lot of experience with youth. In fact, I'm happy to say that some of the youth that I've spent my time with are now adults with their own kids. I'm older than I look, I think, but um, but I will say that I really loved, and what I see common is you had said don't use your or a lot of people can use their diagnosis as a shield. And I've seen that. I've seen that in the younger, up and coming generation of. It's almost like every time you speak to them, they start with their diagnosis. How's your day going? Well, I do suffer from this, but today was, and I think diagnosis. You've opened my eyes to how it can be helpful, but also a good idea of how it can also be harmful. Don't necessarily let your diagnosis define or describe you. Use it as a way to help you and edify your life and to help other people gain an understanding of you. But yeah, I really like that. I really like that little piece that you brought up about not using it to be a shield to hide behind or an excuse to do certain things. Last but not least, I have your services page pulled up so everyone can see. So if you go on her website, if you go to the services tab, you can see just the kind of writing and freelance that you do. You did mention before, and I brought it up that your main thing now is that you are a freelance writer, and it's not just specialized in mental health, but it's also gonna be blogs, guides, toolbox talks, web page prose, email templates, proofreading, ghostwriting. And home, beauty, travel, HGV, and haulage businesses, satire. So if anyone is out there and wants to and they read some of your writing on this webpage and think, oh, I need someone to write up a blog or a blurb or a blog or something for me, is your website the best way to contact you for hiring you?
Way, really. I mean, as you probably found out, I hadn't actually checked my forms on there, but on that services page should be my work email address, borderingbears@gmail.com. There's also the portfolio page where you can see a few bits of my previous writing. I don't have too much on there because a lot of it is ghost written, meaning my hands are tied. It's not published in my name. I can't tell you what it is, where it is,
Yeah.
which does make it tricky. But that, as strange as it sounds, that in itself was also a way of me overcoming my mental health. I found it difficult to hold down a normal job because I would get stressed or be unable to deal with certain things. So I just figured I'd do it myself,
Yeah.
as with a lot of things. But no, if you contact me through Facebook, Instagram, or at borderingbears@gmail.com, I'm happy to write. And regarding prices as well, I have had people say, "Oh, I'd like to have a blog post written, but I don't think I can afford it." While I am trying to make a living, especially if it's to do with mental health or something that's going to help people, I'm open to any discussion.
Awesome. Well, that is good to know. Verity, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone on the recording, but then I'll say goodbye to you off camera.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. I hope everyone's found this to just be a helpful discussion around mental health and to open up awareness that, you know, Verity and I just I randomly found her on the internet. And what I found is when you open up with people, you talk to them, I used to feel so isolated that I was, the only one kind of dealing with these things. And there's a lot of people who are actually having this journey in life and might be keeping it secret or keeping it to themselves. Just know that we want to spread awareness and open up the conversation more and make it where people are more comfortable talking about these things. You don't need to hide in the dark. You can find a local community. You can get help. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'll say goodbye to Verity here on my own time. But bye, everyone.